episode 2 of the Sim Racing Perspectives podcast for the 20th of May 2018. I'm your host, Davy Jones, and today I'm joined by Mike from Sim Racing 604.
Hello.
And Alex from The Extra Mile.
What's up, guys?
And as a surprise, we have a special guest. Our special guest today is Billy Strange from Billy Strange Racing. Hello, Billy.
Hi, I like being the surprise.
We wanted Billy to join, and Mike has some questions that he wanted to ask Billy. So, Mike, would you lead with the questions for Billy, please?
Absolutely. So, Billy, obviously, you're the man that needs no introduction in the sim racing world. You got a long history, and you moved on recently from ISR and started your own thing. How has the sort of transition out of ISR been? Is where you're at in sim racing now, is that kind of how you envisioned your sim racing life, as it were, once you departed ISR?
I am not sure that I had like any sort of well-laid plan. It's tough to tell because the thing with doing content with ISR, I've been doing videos on YouTube since the middle of 2012. And that was off and on. And getting into ISR was a nice opportunity. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to obviously voice my opinion on things, learn about the industry in a different way, and transitioning from that to, basically I'm all on my own. I have none of those contacts were mine. So I'm not going to say, hey, remember me and try to, go back to the people that were providing codes and stuff like that. So I'm really starting all over. And I guess there was no real expectation when I left as to how popular the channel would be. Because getting back to what I was referencing earlier, ISR is very split as far as the things that would draw views. Obviously, previews and hardware reviews did really well. It was hit and miss with the content that I would do. Sometimes it was very sim dependent, and it was also, it seemed to be anything new was really the thing that people wanted to watch. And then if I did one sim versus another sim, one would get a lot of attention, the other one wouldn't. And the type of content that I always envisioned was, I didn't want to just cover the stuff that was new anymore. And I wanted to cover the stuff that I thought was fun and maybe people missed or hadn't thought about in a while. And so that people could try it out and enjoy the, whatever car and track combination that I came up with. And not that I don't want to do reviews. It's just, I don't know. That's kind of what I was envisioning going forward. So on that respect, it's done exactly what I wanted it to do. It's also garnered an audience that I think is more level and more thoughtful in the comments that I receive. Even if somebody disagrees with me, it's not pure vile and hatred being spewed, which was not unusual for inside sim racing. And I think that was just a product of covering so many different topics and gathering such a diverse audience that you're going to get people like that, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. So there's no greater vision for your channel at this point for Billy Strange Racing. That is, you're not trying to build, 1 million followers, or you're just kind of doing videos you like. Is that right?
Yeah, the competitive side of me says, of course, I want, to be one of the higher sub YouTube channels or whatever. But realistically, it doesn't really matter. I'm thankful for the people that like to listen and watch. And that's pretty much good enough for me. Would I like more subscribers? Sure. But in the end, I don't want to just, and I think you mentioned this before, I don't want to pump out content that I'm not happy with. And I don't want to pump out content to try to grab a click. I just want to make something that I'm either passionate about or that maybe I have some knowledge. I want to help people if I can and be entertaining at the same time. So that's really the main goal. And as long as I'm doing that, I'm okay with how it's going.
That's awesome. And I noticed on your channel, as part of things you like doing, you feature Project Cars 2 a lot. and I do as well. And anytime I post about Project Cars 2, I get, that percentage of people who just hate on it and just say it's a, Simcade or it's just for gaming or whatever. What's your sort of take on Project Cars 2? Obviously you like it, obviously you race it a lot, but does it warrant any of the criticism that it often garners?
The issue with Project Cars 2 is it came out too early. That's, in a nutshell, that's the issue I find with Project Cars 2. I think they were trying to beat some of the rush of the other games that came out, especially on console. And I think it needed more time to bake in the oven. I like Project Cars 2 much more than I like Project Cars 1. But it does have some problems. And I always find that the perspective of what is sim versus what isn't is a matter of perspective. What have you been playing or driving that you're familiar with? Austin Oganowski posted something in Reddit about the issues with AC, and take his, working for SMS out of it. He does make some valid points. AC has gotten better about their tire model. Same thing with Project Cars 2 from Project Cars 1. There are still cars that don't drive right in Project Cars 2, but I think that that's inherently going to happen when you have so many different cars. That it being a catch-all and trying to make them all drive accurately and correct, with that many cars is an incredibly difficult task, because each car reacts different to chassis flex and tire models, tire construction, suspension geometry. I mean, you've got all these different things. It's not like you can just take one formula and then plug it in and everything works, because then everything would drive the same. So the task that they had putting all those cars in there, it was a big task. I do have a lot of fun driving their older cars. I think their older cars drive better. And as for it being on my channel so much now, it just kind of happenstance. They put out some stuff recently that I really enjoyed. And then when I asked my subscribers what they wanted me to do for a playthrough, which is obviously going to take a while, they mentioned Project Cars 2. So I've been trying to put that out as regularly as I can. But on a whole, Project Cars 2 does some things right that makes sense to me, coming from somebody that's driven race cars. The way the cars, some of the cars, not all of them, some of the cars feel as they go through the turns, does seem like it has a lot of grip compared to some of the other sims, which I don't know that the other sims are exactly correct either. So I think it's just what you're used to. And I think people should take that into account more. Most people don't have the background to determine what is realistic versus what isn't. Those are kind of ambiguous terms to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that 100%. Like I, for one, will be the first to admit that I have no idea what a GT3 car should feel like. So for me, like you mentioned perspective, and you mentioned, it's what you're used to. I also think that, is it fun? Are you having fun driving it? It seems to be a crime in the sim. Well, I shouldn't say by all parties, but, for those that choose to really hate on a certain sim or hate on a certain car or whatever, it's like a crime that thing could just be fun. Like, I think if somebody really enjoys driving Gran Turismo Sport or really enjoys driving Project Cars 1 or 2, why is that such a bad thing, So,
well, but it's the nature of sim racing. Sim racing is supposed to be the most realistic. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to tap into an audience, if you will, that desires the idea of driving these cars in a virtual environment for the most realistic experience. The problem is that
fair enough.
Yeah, but the problem is that depending on your background, a lot of people that sim race, not all of them, but a good portion of people that sim race don't play video games because they think that's an icky word, right? Sim racing is video games. I don't care what you say. It's a video game. People get really upset when you call it a video game. It's a video game.
I agree.
They don't want to be labeled as a guy that's playing, video games in their later years. So what they end up doing is they make this separation between, well, it's not a video game because it's supposed to be realistic. Okay, that's fine. If that's how you want to define what you're doing and that makes you sleep at night better, I'm all for that. I think for those of us that played other games or like console stuff back in the day, I know, Mike, we talked about it, and it sounds like everybody's kind of in the same boat here, where video games tends to change your perception of how you view a driving game in my thought process, at least, where I can have fun with a car that may not be the most realistic. I mean, a good example of this would be in Race Room, that Formula car that they came out, and Automobilista did the same thing. Those are not technically real race cars. Those are fantasy cars. But the fun in those cars is immense. I mean, those are great cars to drive. I think a purist would look at that and go, but that's not a real car. Okay, that's fine. And I think that's where the dividing line becomes very apparent, is people come to sim racing only wanting the most realistic experience they can possibly get. And I totally understand that. My opinion about anything that I've done ever, whether it be racing big cars, RC cars, slot car racing, anything competitive that I've ever done, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. That's been my opinion. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I guess the only other two things I wanted to talk with you about, 2017 was the year I came onto the scene, and I have a little bit of history that I've kind of put together through videos and things like that. And it seemed like 2017 was just a huge year for sim racing in general. And, we're going to talk in a little bit about Assetto Corsa Competizione and things like that. But what do you see coming? What's on the horizon for sim racing that really excites you?
So the interesting thing about Assetto Corsa Competizione is the avenue that they're pursuing with that title being focused on one series. And so I had predicted something like that on ISR, I don't know, a year and a half ago, that you were going to see developers start moving away from doing this catch-all, all these cars, because it's so hard to do the physics for all of those cars. What would make more sense is to either get the backing of a series or to get a certain specific genre of car that you can develop that all kind of land in the same ballpark. And then you can release expansions upon that. So in other words, you work on one. So let's say the guys at Kunos decide this is what they're doing. And then maybe they develop an expansion for it or a standalone title that covers road cars or classic Formula One cars, or, take any genre you want. We used to get games back in the day that focused on one series. And maybe they can do that now, maybe not charge quite as much, and get a full-blown title that encompasses all of what that series has to offer. Because I don't know about you guys, but I like lining up on a grid that has a good representation of all the cars that participated in a series and all the tracks that participated in the series. Because the idea is I'm trying to recreate what I could not do in real life. And maybe that's race in this series. So you might see more developers try to branch out in that direction. You'll still probably have the Forzas and the Gran Turismos do, this all-in-one package, but like Project Cars 2 or Kunos may not go forward as hard on that route.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very healthy way for them to move forward. I hope that actually happens. And I guess speaking of GT3, speaking of Blancpain, they're running Silverstone right now. Actually, that's an exciting race. But I wanted to talk to you, Billy, about kind of the bigger picture of racing, because you have real world racing experience. What race series do you follow in real life, if any? Because I remember, I got to take you back about this time last year. I think it was the Azerbaijan GP, and I was listening to Inside Sim Racing. I was listening to the podcast, and it was the race where Sebastian Vettel ran into the back of Lewis Hamilton, and it was a big deal, and it was all over the media. And I remember tuning into ISR after that, and you said those two were just acting like a couple of cats, but cats wasn't the word you used in that particular case. So I kind of got the impression that F1 wasn't really your thing. I don't want to, put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing it's a bit too kind of pretentious and is not kind of real racing. But what kind of racing series do excite you these days?
Well, I follow just about everything. So I may not watch a whole Formula One race. Depends on the track that they're going to, if I find it interesting. The cars this year are more interesting to me. Sans the halo. I understand the purpose of that, but that's another topic. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of different motorsports. I grew up in a family that my grandfather did a lot of different styles of racing, from anything from way back in the day. He did stuff with motorcycles, trials and hair scrambles and stuff like that. He drag raced. He raced what we call hardtops in the United States on, old Ford coupes and stuff on dirt tracks. He did a lot of different stuff. My dad actually, raced flat track. And then he went on to race modified and sprint cars. I've kind of dabbled in a bunch of different stuff. I've been the first one to do any sort of real, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say road racing. I've tested some cars, but it's mainly been shifter karts, a 125 shifter on big road courses. Like I haven't been to Laguna Seca, but that's where the series runs. So I've been on like Button Willow and Thunder Hill and some other tracks. So I kind of follow everything. I mean, I grew up in the 80s where sports car racing was still really big. Group C was one of my favorite cars, and then IMSA GTP and the GTO cars. I go back to the Group 5 cars. I grew up in an era where I woke up really early to watch Formula One races, where Ayrton Senna and Prost and Nigel Mansell, Gerhard Berger, all these guys with cars that were coming out with active suspension and nasty sounding motors, engines. And I don't know. I like older stuff. I like modern stuff. I think the modern GT stuff in the last decade has been really inspiring. But then I go back to the GT1 cars, where the Salines and MC12s and stuff like that were running. Lister Storm is such an awkward and unique car that I absolutely love it. Even though it didn't do a whole lot, I just think it was really a unique car to run in a series like that. So I follow everything now. I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades. If you pinned me down and started asking me really specific questions, I may not be able to give them a specific answer. But I like a lot of different stuff. And I think I kind of reflect that in maybe the sims and cars that I choose to run as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, Davy, I think that's pretty much the end of my interrogation for Billy. He stood up to it.
I made it through.
Billy, can I ask you a basic question? You've referred to this many times, sprint car. Do you mean like the dirt cars in iRacing? What do you mean exactly?
Yeah, sprint cars in the United States are a purpose-built oval car. They can be raced on asphalt primarily right now in the United States. Dirt is the most popular option. So those are the cars in iRacing. And that's the cars that I raced primarily, the winged version. So the one that has the airfoil on the top, the aluminum funny looking thing. So that's primarily, when I say sprint car, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. So thank you, Billy. Thank you, Mike. So we wanted to discuss the onset of the next title from Kunos in Italy, Assetto Corsa Competizione. And I would like Alex to lead with this section. Alex, if you would, please.
Yeah, I think most of us consider Assetto Corsa to be at least in the top 3 of sims in terms of just pure driving fun and realism. So a new title from Kunos is always something that I'm very much looking forward to personally. And I think most sim racers feel the same. So I think Assetto Corsa Competizione is something that's very interesting and a very hot topic right now because the release is relatively imminent. I think if I remember that correctly, they talked about getting into beta sometime this summer. So yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about. And I want to pick up something that Billy said about focusing on one class of cars, so to speak, and the advantages that come from that focus. And I have listened to an interview with Aris, who develops the physics mostly for Assetto Corsa, and he said that this allows them to make some fundamental changes and improvements to the physics engine because they don't have to apply that to over 100 different cars. So in the past, when they tried to update the physics, or when they did update the physics engine in Assetto Corsa, the tire physics or whatever, they had to apply that update to, I don't know how many cars there are on Assetto Corsa, but it is probably about 100 or 120 or something, different cars. So that makes it very difficult to actually improve the underlying physics engine of the simulation. So now with this fresh start, and with a focus on just, in air quotes, GT3 cars, they do have a chance to improve the physics engine and get in the visual tire flex and all that kind of stuff. So that's very interesting, I think, and one big advantage from the focus of this sim. So yeah, I think where we could start is to just go around the room, so to speak, and say what we personally want from it. What would be the things on our minds that we want to improve over the basic Assetto Corsa? And in my personal view, sound is always very important to me. So while there were great sounding cars in Assetto Corsa, like the R34 Skyline, for example, there were quite a few others that did not sound very good. So I hope that they can take a fresh look at that and deliver us a better experience with the GT3 cars. And of course, there's night and day, dynamic lighting, dynamic weather, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of potential for improvements here. So what do you guys think? What's on your mind regarding that?
Well, I'll just jump in here. I have one reservation. Believe me, I'm going to be a day one purchaser of it. But my only concern, because the screenshots I've seen so far look absolutely incredible. They look amazing.
Yes.
But will my 2-year-old PC run it? Because I sure cannot afford to go out and buy a 1080 Ti right now. Like the price of video cards, it's coming down slightly, but it's still way up there. So I'm hoping they don't push the graphics aspect too hard and make it so that everybody has to run with this game on low settings, or not everybody, but most of us. So that's a very real concern of mine. Point. Like, again, I see these screenshots and it blows my mind, but I also, the part of me that looks at my bank account and says, I'll never see those. That's my only concern, I guess.
My guess would be if you run a 1060 or better, you'll be fine running it on fairly high graphical fidelity. Yeah. I think so too.
What are you running, Billy? Because I noticed in your last video, I think you were running GT4 at, I can't remember what course it was, but you had rain effect on and it looked perfect. What's your hardware?
I run a 1070 and I'm also running an ultra wide, so it eats up even more than just a standard 1920 by 1080. So the 1070 bang for the buck, I think, is probably the best card that you can get, especially right now with the prices the way they are, even though they're getting better. And then I have like 16 gigs of RAM. I don't have like a super crazy processor or anything like that. But yeah, I think that they would be foolish to try and make it so intense that it alienates a lot of their audience. So I would say, if you've got a moderately, in the last handful of years, a moderately good card, you should be all right to run it on a nice setting.
And they'll also want to put it on consoles, and they will know from Valve what the average PC is running, because Valve do the surveys every once in a while, and they're obviously automatically gathering data as well.
And they're also using a pre-made engine this time, so I think a lot of the optimization that you would want from a title should be already in there, if I'm not mistaken about that. I mean, it's not easy to...
I don't know about that. I've seen other games run on Unreal, and it's sometimes doesn't work out so well. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Hopefully what they'll do is like they did with Assetto Corsa now, is that game is it's optimized pretty well in my opinion. So hopefully they'll just kind of take that same stance on ACC when they put that out.
How big is the starting grid in this series? I have no idea about that, but I assume it's more than 20 cars.
Yeah, like at 6 hours of Monza, there's 53 cars.
Oh.
So I don't think that's
probably won't get that.
Probably not. So what do you guys think about modding? Was that a big deal to you in Assetto Corsa? Would you miss it if it would not be possible in the new game? It certainly won't be that easy, if it's possible at all.
Definitely. I would miss it.
I would not.
No, you wouldn't. Why so?
Because it doesn't need it. It's a different type of title. It is not a catch-all title, and you still have Assetto Corsa that you can do that with. They're not killing off AC. So I find that, while I understand the desire to have mods, what you're going to find is the physics are going to be based around GT3. And importing other cars that don't fit around that, I think, is going to wreak havoc on a lot of modding. Not saying that people can't do it. I know there's a lot of smart people out there. I'm just saying it's going to be very difficult. And if there's an easier way to make that happen, a la AC, I think they're still going to put that stuff on AC. And remember R Factor 2. The reason R Factor 2 for a long time didn't get a lot of support is because that tire model was so complex. And what happened? Everybody moved to AC. So I still see the same thing happening. You might see some people venture into ACC and try to do it. But I think the majority of people will still flock to AC. So I don't think it's that big of a deal not to have it.
I guess, sorry, if I might interject, I guess, Billy, basically I was kind of thinking out loud, and then thinking on it again, it comes back to a point you made earlier, which I think is very important. You talked about them focusing on a series with a smaller body of content that they can really focus on, and let the Forzas and the Gran Turismos, let those be the 500 and 600 and 700 car collection games. And I also see that as you go closer to simulation on the PC side, maybe it's creating even a larger gap in the quality of the titles. I mean, if Assetto Corsa Competizione is purely a representation or a recreation of the Blancpain GT series, it being as realistic as possible, there will be a divide between, for example, driving an Audi GT3 on Forza and then driving in the same car in ACC on PC. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're going to have... Well, people already know how I feel about Forza, but
that's true.
I think as long as they stick to what Kunos appears to be good at, while I do have a little issue with some of the way the cars drive in Assetto Corsa, for the most part, I think they're fun cars. They've got fun cars to drive. They've paid attention to detail pretty well, in my opinion. So as long as they keep that mindset moving forward and put that into Competizione, I think they'll be just fine. I think that will definitely differentiate themselves from a GT or a Forza. And I I suspect they will put it on console, but it will take longer. And purely for the fact that they don't want to repeat what happened. If you remember, the initial launch of AC on the console was not good. And I think part of that is they just didn't understand the console market. Again, console market has more gaming people. So there's your divide, just like we were talking about before. There's that divide, and where simulation people don't not that they don't understand, they just don't care about trying to unlock cars or have that little, checkered flag and the little ceremony at the end when you win a race. AC just kind of goes boop and you're done. So
that's true.
I think if they're smart, they're going to take the lessons they've learned from AC on the console and implement them across the board. And then to make sure that they've got it right, the console version will come out later
when it's ready. Yeah. And my assumption. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Sorry. I was just going to say something we kind of touched on earlier was, them focusing on one race series. But I think something that's telling, and I've ranted about this before, is the fact that they called it Assetto Corsa Competizione and not Assetto Corsa Blancpain. I think what you could see in the future is DLC packs. There's no doubt that we're in the DLC era of gaming, right?
Yes.
Developers love to release a game and then add on after the fact, and it gets them a little bit of extra money while not having to, reinvent the wheel, as it were, to create a new platform. So I think you could see, a GT4 add-on pack, or possibly some low-end. They won't get F1, but possibly some lower-end open wheel series as well that would lend themselves well to the tracks that are going to be included. So I think that's something else to be excited about with this. I don't think they'll just release it as GT3 and that's it forever. Yeah. I really think you could see some DLC packs.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah, and the pricing model for DLC has also just gone a way that I don't agree with. Like, for example, the karting expansion for R Factor 2, I think you got 2 karts and 3 tracks or something to that effect.
Worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a huge price. I think it was, $25 US or something, which was 70 or 80% the value of the whole game. So, not saying I agree with it, but it's possibly an option that Kunos could exercise in the future.
Yeah.
Kunos has been pretty good with their pricing
they have,
in my opinion, their little DLC. And I think you're right. I think you could see, like, again, we were alluding to earlier, is that once they get this sorted out, it's good. It's on its way to being official. There's no reason why they haven't been testing the waters and developing, like you said, a GT4 package to put out for, and that's the beauty of it. Once you have those tracks set, if you're using the majority of those tracks, then you're really just coming up with cars.
Maybe a recreation of different series who also race on the same tracks.
Right. Yeah. And maybe they'll throw in, another track or two.
Yeah.
But they don't, tracks, from my understanding, and developers don't skewer me on this if you hear this, if I'm wrong. From my understanding and talking and working with developers, the tracks is what really kills it. Like, it's really not easy to develop a track with all the assets that they have to recreate, where a car tends to take less time. So I think that's just a better way to approach it all the way around.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the tracks really are a big undertaking, and especially larger tracks like a Spa or Le Mans or something like that. It's a lot to do.
Yeah, I did hear that it took them 2 years to put Nordschleife together for Assetto Corsa.
Oh, I believe that immediately. I mean, just putting a team on the ground and scanning the track is quite an ordeal in itself. And then getting that data, preparing that data, importing that data, the textures and all that kind of stuff. It's a huge amount of work.
Wow.
Do I recall correctly? Is it so that the Nürburgring Nordschleife is the only laser scan track in AC? Or
I don't think that's.
I thought Laguna was.
Yeah.
Laguna definitely is laser scanned. Well, that's a good question, actually. I'm not sure.
I thought the later tracks were were laser scanned. I don't believe all of them are, but I thought the later ones were.
That's true. There's a list on Race Department. If you just Google Assetto Corsa car and tracks list, there's a list, and I can't remember the user who did it, but he put all 178 cars and then every single track, and he put an asterisk beside the ones that weren't laser scanned.
Yes.
And I think it's about 50-50, and I think you're correct, Billy. I think the modern, or sorry, not the modern, but the more recent tracks were laser scanned.
Yeah,
and it's something that I had been thinking about in the overall, like from the business point of view. Obviously, my assumption would be that 505 would be publishing the game, and then Kunos got bought out by an investment company. Was it Digibras or something? They're doing a deal with SRO, who managed the series. So obviously, and back to mods, they don't want modding included in an official series. And I have a list of 10 tracks which are part of the series that runs from March until September. So they have a fixed list of tracks and a fixed list of cars. And coming back to something that Mike said, for example, it's called Assetto Corsa Competizione and not Assetto Corsa Blancpain, or the official game of Blancpain GT series like F1, which from Codemasters or WRC. So could it be so that it could be a platform for different racing series to license themselves and then appear inside the game, like Mike mentioned? Maybe you could be a WTCR pack, or for example the VLN or something like that. Could it be so that it could go that way?
That's a very good idea. I think if this is successful, and I don't actually know how the business model works here. I mean, I know that Kunos is or has the official license for this series, but how does that work? Do they pay them up front? So they can use these cars and tracks, or what I'm asking myself is the actual sales, or are the sales a factor here? Does the series get anything when the game is sold, or is the license sold separately? I'm not sure how this works.
Perhaps it's a revenue sharing model.
Yeah, I've heard of several different. Yeah, I've heard of several different ways that companies will do this. I mean, the most common is just to license it, but there are some exceptions to that rule where I won't say who it is, but I believe that they do a revenue sharing deal where, this gets purchased, whether it be a full title or DLC, and then so-and-so gets a share of whatever that purchase was. So it's hard to say in something like this.
I'm so sorry, guys, but I have to leave right now. I have a birthday party to attend to. So, yeah. Just wanted to say goodbye, and I hear you next week or
no
the
problem,
week after
Alex.
that.
We will talk to you next time, and I can continue then with the questions here. So,
all right. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
See you later.
Bye.
Now, so the questions we have that Alex, and thanks to Alex for including, was, for example, what improvements over AC do we hope for in terms of handling sound, visuals, time of day, and weather? Now, obviously, with Unreal Engine 4, they have already mentioned weather effects and day and night transitions. But in terms of handling, I guess AC is pretty good right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. It could still stand a couple improvements, in my opinion, but overall, it works well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much functional. My take on Assetto Corsa, whenever I'm asked about it, is it's good at everything. And not every title can boast that. I say Assetto Corsa is the best at very few things, but it's good at everything.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just kind of tweaks on their part. I really do. Like, I don't think they need to really completely reinvent themselves as a sim or anything as dramatic as that. But I think it's fun. I think the night and weather effects will be cool. I'm not a guy that likes to race in the rain. Personally, it just doesn't move me for whatever reason. But I think for me, oh yeah.
If you're simulating it, why would you choose to drive in the rain anyway?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, the idea is that rain is supposed to be the great equalizer. It's supposed to take the technology, and put it on a level playing field. The problem I have is usually it's not done correctly, or if it is done correctly in the rare instant, it's often implemented way too much.
Yes.
So that's I don't get too excited about weather, rain, because just what I said, it's not often implemented correctly. Cars don't typically feel the way they do when I've experienced running in a wet condition. And then if it is done right, it's way too much because they want to show it off. You know, they made that asset, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
they probably put a lot of time into it, but at the same point, I'm not trying to run in the rain 50% of the time. Like, that just doesn't appeal to me.
And I guess it also comes back to the resources footprint they're managing, because they have to be realistic. For example, somebody on a 1080 Ti and PC can run rain and so on, heavy rain in 4K, and then what's available what's possible on a PS4 or PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and so on. Of course, it's up to the user what version they run, but obviously they want to manage expectations, and they do have now the two versions of the PlayStation and the Xbox to account for as well, so they have to take that into account.
Yeah, that's right. And I think probably, and I don't know, I'm not a developer, obviously, but I think possibly the console versions, it might be a bit easier for them to optimize because the hardware is a set value.
It's a template.
Right? They know
that's correct. Yes.
They know the framework they have to work within. Let's do the most with this exact specification.
Yeah. And then we had a comment on, and it comes back to Mike's comment earlier, and the comment on perhaps could it become a platform. Will there be an Assetto Corsa 2 in the future? What do we think?
Depends on the length of the future.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, and something I've often noticed, people will talk about Assetto Corsa. They will say, well, I like street cars, or I like street cars, I don't like race cars, and vice versa. And obviously this is going to be a very specific title. So if you're not interested in the Blancpain series or the range of cars and the range of tracks, it's not going to be for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about that, actually. That's extremely specific.
Yes, and I don't think they're too worried about that. I think they still view AC as a viable product. I don't think you're going to see an AC2 anytime soon.
I don't either.
And I know that might upset people that like to run the street cars, but they still have AC. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with AC. It's still a solid platform to use.
It is.
But the development obviously has been going towards the Competizione. So I don't see an AC2 like in the next year or even two. I think you're going to, if they were to ever to do one, again, this is kind of where I go back to, I think possibly we're seeing a shift away from this all-encompassing stuff. Maybe they, in a few years, release a street car, something like that, where it's just a title all about having cars to race, or maybe they release just a mod title that they'll put some content in, and that'll be for street guys. Who knows? I'm fairly certain though that they're not going to come out with an AC2 anytime soon. And
I'm sure what you just mentioned, Billy, is a good idea. I think also a lot of the car brands would be very interested in that, because it would in effect be the ultimate simulation of their cars. For those who
it's
want
always
to really
hard to figure out
what
those guys want, but sure.
Now, also another point, and it's something I think you guys touched on your chat with Mike on your channel, Billy, which I'll link to below in the description. Now, the career section, the campaign, if you will, part of Assetto Corsa is very limited, and I think it affected the game. And you mentioned Austin Organowski. Austin was formerly of PretendRaceCars.net, which is now gone because Austin has been doing some work for Slightly Mad Studios. And I remember that when Assetto Corsa came on console on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, that Austin wrote several articles kind of pardon me, ripping it apart. So I'm wondering now, and also I noticed from some of the reviews from the IGNs and the GameSpots that Assetto Corsa was kind of criticized in a way because the career mode wasn't there like it is in Forza Motorsport 7, And I have some notes here from one of the publications which lists that the game will play host to the teams and drivers of the Blancpain series. Kunos has used motion capture tech to accurately reproduce the drivers and the folks in the pits, and then there's a reference to laser scan. So I wonder, will it be an F1 2017 type thing where you're in the pits and then there's a pit crew, a pit manager, a team manager? And I guess the question is, it's something that Kunos really haven't done before. So I wonder, how do you guys think they're going to address it?
In terms of
Mike.
career mode? Yeah. I would be excited for that. I hope it is. I think
so do
F1, the F1 series so far, I think that's probably what they do best, is their career mode. If you consider it a sim, we won't get into that discussion, but if you do consider it a sim, I think it's on par with the best career modes. And so I wouldn't see why you couldn't put that into Competition. Maybe it's sort of an expansion on what Project Cars 2 has done with the race engineer or something like that. Maybe you could have it, work on your tune for you or something like that. The thing is, and I could be mistaken, it's been a while since I've driven the title, but I think you could kind of improve your car in F1. But with the homologated specs of the Blancpain series, I don't really know what you could do with that. Like, I think the car is almost a fixed value other than, fine tuning.
Yeah, that's
true. I could be wrong.
Yeah. And perhaps also for the console crowd, if I might say, not to, but the console consumers maybe expect more of a career, and also from the point of view of, you see people like Jimmy Broadbent and Super GT, they're doing this career mode of, like, for example, F1 17 career 100%, and every once in a while they come out with an episode, as are you, Billy, with the Ginetta series for Project Cars 2. So that kind of thing makes for nice kind of walkthrough videos or streams of people going through the campaign, and also it's a form of promoting the title.
Right. I do not think you're going to have a very in-depth career. And the reason that I say that is just what I cited earlier, the divide between sim racers that have only sim raced in their life and never really gotten into video games. I heard the race department, I don't know if you guys listened to that, but the race department interview that they did with
Paul,
the two boys from Kunos,
Stefano and Marco.
Yes. Thank you. They pretty much said they didn't understand why you would want anything like that. As far as a sense of progression, a sense of ownership, they're like, why they didn't understand. There's like, this is a single player career. You race against the AI. That's it. And a career can be so much more than that. A career can be where you start with the lower level team. And have to unlock the other teams as you go along. But that's what I think has been lost for a while in sim racing, is there's, we've got skin in the game when you go do a multiplayer race, right? But we've lost all the skin in the game when it comes to racing offline. And so that makes it more like a throwaway part of the simulation. So then there's not as much effort put into it. And then you get to the point where people have been used to that, and they go along and they're like, wait, why would you want to unlock a car? That sounds like a pain in the butt. It can be, but if done right, you get a really good sense of reward and progression, just like we used to have. And I'm going to go back in my day again. Where some of the older games. And even you could even make that argument for like a GTR2 or something, or even, well, actually, what's a better example is GT Legends. And people didn't like that, if I remember correctly. To me, I like that kind of stuff. I like there to be skin in the game, a reason to progress, a reason to keep going, and not just have it be only multiplayer. Because I think, like Mike and I were discussing, that's not always an option for me. Sometimes I have a limited amount of time I want to get on, and I still want to have a realistic race. It's not about me winning. It's about me putting myself in a realistic scenario and trying to run a race when I have the chance, and not trying to find people and all this stuff. If I end up having the chance and time to do that, that's great. I'll go run a multiplayer race.
Yeah.
But I really suspect that they don't quite understand that. And again, it's going to bite them when it comes to the console stuff. I think sim racing on the PC is going to be not as critical to them.
That's true.
For the audience, I mean.
Yes. Exactly.
Guys like me, I'll be like, I kind of wish there was, but okay. There's not, where console, I think, is really not going to receive it well now that it's locked down to a single series, if there isn't some sort of really well thought out career mode.
And I kind of envision it as, let's say, if I wanted to be Nicky Team driving for Aston Martin Racing, and then I start in the season, and then, for example, you have the Endurance Cup events and the Sprint Cup events, and you start off in the outgoing Aston Martin Vantage, and you work your way through, and that will be enough for me just to, you know, select from the UI, okay, the driver, the team, the series, and just go from there, and then be presented with the events and just continue, because I want to experience the driving. For example, I'm a fan of Nicky's work, and the Aston Martin isn't in at least AC right now, so that would be interesting for me. And also, for example, because there's a new Bentley Continental and so on, so there's also some cars that I haven't experienced. But maybe, as you say, Billy, maybe people will expect more progression from a console point of view. But they do have a basis to work on with the series, and also I'm assuming that, I mean, from the Assetto Corsa on PC and console, they have serviceable AI code, they have serviceable physics code, and they also have their force feedback layer. So I guess they're just working on converting that to the Unreal Engine and go from there. So I guess a lot of the technical groundwork has already been done, and indeed a lot of the 3D models for the cars also already exist. So they're onto a good start, I would say.
Right. Yeah.
Mike, you had a final question for Billy. What type of sim racing is he into, and is ACC something he would consider buying on day one, or does he want to wait for reviews and so on? So what about you, Billy? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'll be buying it day one, unless there's something horrendously wrong with it, but I sincerely doubt that. I think we're going to go into early access.
That's true.
I'm going to purchase it. Yeah, I'm going to get it right then. Just to see how they're going, how they're doing, and how they're progressing. In fact, Assetto Corsa was one of the only titles that I have purchased in early access. That, and along with Dirt Rally. I think Dirt Rally was in early access as well.
It was. Dirt Rally was early access too. And also Automobilista was also early access.
Yes.
That's
so
true.
Take that 3. Those are the 3 that I have purchased. I don't really purchase any other titles, games in early access. So, but I believe there's a pedigree behind those studios, and no different now with Kuno's. And I think that I think I'll be okay purchasing day one. I don't unless they do something really weird. I don't foresee there being where I'm going to hate the title right out of the gate. Yeah,
I think there will be a lot of curiosity from the Assetto Corsa community to begin with, and most of us, well, I guess, will at least invest in the early access title day one. Now, this is something you guys touched on, Billy, your chat with Mike, the online potential, and then the possibility to compete with iRacing. Is that something that you guys want to discuss?
Yeah, will it compete with iRacing? Probably not, because I think iRacing... I don't think so either. Yeah, iRacing has found its niche for sure. It's, the go-to if you're serious about online racing. In fact, I think some of the bigger names in sim racing right now are racing the Indy 500 on iRacing, and Jimmy Broadbent's got 2,000 simultaneous views. So iRacing is just the platform.
That is true.
The platform for online racing. So I don't think they'll unseat them, but if they can even get close, if they can make it really good and have a safety rating that works and kind of eliminate the guys who are just there to bash you out of the race in turn one, and again, going back to your phrase, Billy, skin in the game. If you can really feel a sense of pride about your driver status, whatever points or grading they choose to use for the online racing, if you can feel pride in that and want to maintain that, and again, if they can even get close to iRacing with a, you know, reduced cost to do that online racing, could be big for them. It really could be big.
Yeah, and it's something you guys mentioned in your chat on Billy's podcast, the cost base of iRacing, the cost of tracks, the cost of cars, and also the subscription base. And maybe if it's possible to race the Blancpain series online and offline effectively, and like you said, if they also include some kind of licensing system so that wrecking is a thing of the past, they do have potential to be a competitor. And also, you guys also mentioned the fact that iRacing have been hinting at bringing AI racing coming soon. So yeah, it's an open market, I would say. And I think Mike, like you said, if they do it correctly, they do have the opportunity to give them some stiff competition.
I think that I think this title has a decent shot at really putting a lot of pressure on iRacing. They won't have the depth because of it's only the GT3 stuff, but GT3 is incredibly popular.
Yes. And
so if they can implement a system, kind of like the SRS guys do, but maybe a guy, I believe it's just one or two people, but a little more in depth, a little more, you know, a little more about how you not drive in just a series, but you kind of continue to drive throughout the whole course of your career, where you get rid of the problems that GT Sport has, Project Cars 2 has,
yes,
Forza Motorsport has online, and even Assetto Corsa when people were going online. Get rid of those problems. Make a solid multiplayer experience that is, you know, let's be honest, iRacing still is pretty much the benchmark.
Yes.
Make it something that's close to that. You would be surprised because of the lower barrier to entry, how many people would go to ACC if, you know, servers were official.
Yes.
They were always had a bunch of people running, and the racing is good. There's no silly penalty systems or, you know, stuff that's just
rubber
makes
banding
sense.
and so on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
So just make a good, solid experience. I think you would see iRacing really try to start changing what they're doing with some of their stuff.
And it's like Mike mentioned, and again back to your conversation, Mike said sometimes, well, what am I going to play? I play ACC and I play Automobilista. Maybe I'll try a bit of Race Room, and maybe it could be so that somebody like Mike might think, okay, I have an hour, I want to race now, but I want to do it online. And Assetto Corsa Competizione is a good title, and I know that nobody's going to wreck me, and I also know that maybe I can go online now and also progress and maybe earn some more points. So that's something they could focus on. That, like you said, Billy, that's something that definitely has potential.
Yeah, all options are in the air. We'll just have to see how they execute it.
Yeah. Now, so we're running on an hour, and I think Mike needs to go. See you, Mike.
See ya.
See ya.
So, Billy, thank you for joining. It's been really excellent. Is there anything else you on top of your mind you want to discuss in relation to Assetto Corsa Competizione or Project Cars 2 or anything? Or do you want to talk about what you have coming up on your channel?
Oh, geez, I got a whole bunch of opinions on a whole bunch of things that would take way too long. But I think Assetto Corsa Competizione has just a good, legitimate shot at being a very solid title. I think that you may have some people that don't like it and will display that displeasure with the title just because they want it to be something it was never intended to be.
Yes.
So I really think people need to pay attention, kind of get mods off of their brain. Not saying that it can't happen, but I think the expectation needs to be put on the back burner for mods and really understand that this is a focused title on the Blancpain series and just take it for what it is. And if people do that, as long as, like I said, Kunos doesn't do anything weird with how the cars handle or,
Yes.
you know, UI or things to upset people.
Mm.
I think it's going to be a really solid title. I actually think it could be a benchmark for other titles going forward. So
That's also true. And also, I guess, in a way, maybe a bad metaphor is like weighing the scales. If you're tipping the scales, you have mods on one side and the people who are interested in mod cars and mod tracks, but also the career elements that are missing, the weather effects and the progression and the online. Like, for example, maybe you can play online, maybe you don't need to use sim racing systems, because I can remember one time driving online in the Nordschleife in Race Room, and somebody came in a BMW going the other direction and rammed me, and I thought, well, what's the point of that, you know? So
right.
The lack of availability of mods will outweigh the features that people are looking for, and I think if the experience is solid, they're definitely onto a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Okay, Billy. So we is there anything you wanted to plug in terms of your channel now? Of course, I'll link there's a playlist for your podcast. I'll link to below, and also link to your channel. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, just Billy Strange Racing on YouTube.
Yep.
And I just I guess I can say I do the podcasts, and then I do gameplay videos. I've done one kind of how to, which I will be doing more. And just, yeah, it's just about highlighting things either new or old that I find interesting or really enjoy that people might have missed. So
yeah,
I'm on Instagram, strange_Billy, BILLY.
Yep.
And Twitter, same thing.
Yep.
Strange_Billy. And that's that's it. Thanks for having me on.
I'll link to those below in the description, and people can hopefully follow through and follow you. And to finish, if I may, something you said from the very outset, you like to create content that you enjoy, and I completely agree. And I've been thinking about it because I posted a video yesterday that took me a long time to create. Sometimes you wonder, well, what content are people looking for? Is it like top 10, these kind of things? And what obviously from the analytics point of view, it's easy to see what people are finding popular. But as you said, it comes back to creating content that you want to create. And I think that with the changes in YouTube, particularly within the last 6 months, the whole Logan Paul thing and the adpocalypse and so on, I think it's more than important now, more than ever, that to just create content that you want to create and try to build a community based on that.
Yeah, I think if you're genuine and authentic about what you're doing, and people can see you have a passion or hear you have a passion for it, I think that will resonate with a larger group of people for longer. There's no harm in listening to your audience and taking constructive criticism. Indeed. But in the end, it has to be a product that you are happy with. And if you're not happy, I think go back to ISR. I think one of the hard things for me to kind of get over was cover everything that comes out, and even when I don't like it. And I think part of my issue was I felt like at times I could have been a little too negative, and it could have been like, why even cover that if I really don't like it that much? Yeah. So I feel like trying to be more positive, trying to be more involved with the community in sim racing and racing games on YouTube as a whole from a content creator side, making it so it's not so divided between everybody, that, you know, we really all, even though we want different things, we're all moving in the same general direction.
That is true.
Of the things we are looking for.
Yeah.
So just kind of having that back and forth with people, and being able to support one another's YouTube channels and things like that, I think that's what becomes rewarding, because let's face it, the likelihood of myself or the majority of people making a living on YouTube doing this, even though I could probably do this as a semi part-time job, I really don't get paid for it.
No.
In fact, I don't get paid for it right now.
I don't either.
Yeah. So
yeah.
we're part of that whole adpocalypse thing.
We are indeed, and I think
I think that getting
to
the point of you've kind of found, like I said, I've been doing videos on YouTube since 2012. So developing my own style and figuring out what I want to cover and the way I want to cover it has taken me a long time.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
Getting to that point and understanding where you might be able to offer something that's not exactly the same. I mean, look, we're all doing gameplay videos, or we're making, I mean, I like the more documentary style of stuff you're doing because it's very unique.
Yeah, thank you.
But having all those different perspectives is really what gives people the opportunity to find the content that they're looking for. And there's no reason that we can't have, more than one person that we watch and enjoy watching.
That's true. Just true. And if I was making content for clicks, I wouldn't be making the documentary style content I'm making, because it's very difficult to, you're really depending on. It
takes up a huge amount of time.
Oh, it's immense. And I launched a video yesterday. It's over an hour long, and I go through every frame, like frame by frame, just to make sure it's as good as I can make it. And I also think that, back to the revenue thing, I think that if we were not passionate about this hobby or this activity, we wouldn't be doing it at all. Because to be in the position to earn anything to begin with, you have to start. And to have to start, you have to be willing to put in the time, have the equipment,
That's right.
have the software. So definitely it's the passion has to be there to begin. So, and I'm hoping that if, like, I posted a video yesterday, and it was Michael. A shout out to Michael, single racer in Melbourne in Australia, and Michael commented on something, and he hit the note. He did exactly. And also, on a final note, if I may, I posted the link to the episode 1 of our podcast on race department, and someone commented, he said, I was cleaning out the garage and listening to the podcast. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much. And that said a lot to me, because I could picture myself doing the same, pottering around
That's
at home.
Exactly what I do.
Doing housekeeping and listening to something, and that's that for me. It's only like it might only be a comment on race department or Reddit or on YouTube or wherever, but that's enough for me. And if somebody gets it, if it's if it's one person, 10,000 or 100,000, if I know that one person at least is interested, that keeps it going. And I guess invariably I will continue anyway. But it's an organic thing. It's kind of rolling and going as we go. So for those people listening, I will include links to Billy's channel below, and his social media. And we would also, if anybody has any comments on potential topics, or feedback on the format, please let us know. And also know that this episode will be available on iTunes, and search for Sim Racing Perspectives podcast on iTunes. It's also available on Google Play and Stitcher Radio, also an RSS feed. So if you want to manually subscribe, for example, in iTunes or in an podcasting app on your phone, you can just manually enter the RSS feed, and any other related links will be down below in the description. So until next time, goodbye, and thank you again, Billy, for joining.
Oh, thank you. See you guys later.